Welcome, dear beloved of God, to this video. We will continue our mini-series called God's Splendid Time Fabric. That's what I've decided to call it. And we were at the creation or the begetting, of Lamech. So let's continue with that. So Methuselah, the son of Enoch, begot Lamech. And Lamech was the father of Noah. So you see here, Adam created, Adam begot Seth, etc., etc., etc. So we arrived at 870. So I'm going to go up now a little bit. Okay, so just to give more space. The next is, of course, Lamech begot Noah, the 10th from Adam. So, by the way, before I continue, by the way, it's Genesis 5:28-29, and when Lamech begot Noah, he was 182 years old, and that was in the year 1051.5 from Adam. Okay, so what I want to mention is that I mentioned the previous video, the first video, that the disobedient messengers left their habitat and they came on earth and they had children with daughters of humans, and those children became the Nephilim, the giants of old. Why? Because you will not find this in scripture. So our authoritative scripture, you will not find this information. I have this from the book of Enoch, which is of course not scripture, which is not authoritative. So let me emphasize that. However, it's good to have some extra information besides scripture, and of course regard it as such, that it is not authoritative. Just wanted to mention that. Okay, so we continue with Noah. So Noah was 600 years old, and that means in his 600th year when the deluge, the flood came. Read about that in Genesis chapter 12, verse 11. So again, look at this. Noah was 600 years old, 599.5, as we have agreed. And that was in the year 1651 from Adam. So, how long did the deluge, the flood, take? It took 1 year approximately. So, it ended in 1652 from Adam, and it dried up in Noah's 601st year, Genesis 8, verse 13. This is very important to mention because the end of the deluge of Noah, that marked the landing of the Ark of Noah on the Ararat Mountains. Ararat means the curse is reversed. I will repeat that. Ararat means the curse is reversed. And when did the landing happen on Ararat? On Nisan 17. Yeah, you got that right. On Nisan 17. That says a lot. Huge. That was by then still the 7th month and the 70th day, a 70th day on the 7th month. Nisan 17. Remember that because we will revisit this. Next one, Sem, one of Noah's sons, was 100 years old and begot Arphaxad 2 years after the flood was finished. 11 verse 10. So the chronology will go through Sem, not through Ham or through Japheth, but through Sem, because he was the patriarch that led through Abraham, through David to the Messiah. So we will have the chronology through Sem, obviously. Okay, next one. The son of Sem, Arpachshad, he begot Selah, 11 verse 12, when he was 35 years old. Selah begot Heber. Heber, this name is the name of which the word Hebrew, or Hebrews if you want, is derived. So that's the word Heber. Verse 14. He was 30 years old. Little remark here. There is also another person called Canaan. And it's in Luke, Scripture mentions Canaan as being from the father of Selah, and not Arpachshad, but Arpachshad, the father of Canaan, as if Canaan needs to be between the two. I don't believe that. It has a reason. Canaan was, I think, he had a different role as maybe a surrogate father, because Arpachshad died soon or whatever. But Canaan is not really in that line, in the bloodline officially. That's what I believe. So, and of course, looking at the big picture, and I didn't mention that in the previous video, sorry for that. One of the important assumptions is also there's going to be some rounding differences, especially with the 20 kings after King Solomon. So there are some rounding differences because of the years of the throne change, the years of change of throne. And there are, of course, kings that reigned for 3 months only, and so shorter than a year. So there are some rounding differences there. We need to take that into account. But when there are rounding differences, the assumption will be that the bigger picture is leading. Of course, because we already see and established that God's plan and his chronology is very structured and very symmetrical. So let's keep that in mind. All right. Heber begot Peleg. Peleg, in his days, the land was separated. What does it mean? It's in verse 16. The land separated means this. I believe that the earth in the second aeon was one continent, from Adam to Noah and a bit after Noah, after the flood, was one continent. But then in the days of Peleg, there was a huge earthquake, the biggest that has occurred up till now. There will be bigger ones in the future at the end of this eon, but at the beginning of this eon there was the biggest one in the days of Peleg, and the result was that the continent teared up. It teared up, or it tore. Was it tore? Tore up. That's the past tense, I think, of tear. It tore up, and it drove apart very quickly in the waters. So there, from that one continent came into existence multiple continents like Europe, Africa, Asia, etc., Americas. So multiple continents came into existence, and of course also islands and peninsulas, obviously. So that's what happened in the days of Peleg. Peleg begot Rehu. Verse 18. Rehu begot Serug. Verse 20. Serug begot Nahor. Nahor is the granddaddy, the grandfather of Abram. So we are getting close. In the year 1842 from Adam, Serug begot Nahor. Verse 22. Nahor begot Terah, Abram's father, when he was 29 years old. In verse 24. And Terah, watch this now, it's going to be a little bit more difficult. Terah begot Abram. However, we cannot as such establish at what age Terah begot Abram, because we wanna have the chronology, the bloodline through Abram, obviously. So we don't know that. Scripture doesn't mention. So we have to calculate it with other informations that Scripture does provide. So what does Scripture provide? Verse 11. Terah was 70 years old when begetting 3 sons. So was Abram the oldest? Then he would be 70 years old, Terah, when begetting Abram. But Abram was not the oldest one. Let's take a look. I think that Abram was the youngest one. But let's take a look. Terah was 70 years when begetting 3 sons. Verse 32. Terah died at 205 years of age. And Acts 7 verse 2 says, listen to this, after Terah, his father, died, Abram was brought over by God from Haran to this land, the land of the promise as such. And that was Genesis 12 verse 4. That's where it says Abram was 75 years of age when he left Haran. So again, he left Haran after his father died. So when his father was 205 years old, Abram left Haran. And then Genesis 12:4 says Abraham was 75 years when leaving Haran. Obviously then, 205 minus 75 is 130 years was the age of Terah when he begot Abram. So we wrote down 129.5. So also in this same year, 2000 from Adam, exactly 2000 from Adam. Look at that, the structure. Genesis 9 verse 28-29 says, after the deluge, after the flood, Noah lived 350 years. So when he was 600 years, when the flood came, he still lived an extra 350 years. So he was 950 years of age when he died. And if you remember, let's go back. Noah was born in 1051.5 from Adam. And if you add up 600 or 599 plus 350 or 349.5, you get exactly at 2000 again from Adam. So the conclusion, Noah died in the same year as when Abram was born. We continue. Abram was 70 years old when he received God's calling in Ur of the Chaldees and his promise. Abram believed it, and his faith was counted as righteousness. So Abram received God's promise at 70 years of age in the year 2070 from Adam. Keep that in mind. Because in Galatians 3 verse 16-17 it says, the law of Moses came 430 years after God's promise to Abram. That was the same year the law came as the Exodus, which is the 50th Jubilee year. And what is the 50th Jubilee year? 50 times a Jubilee cycle of 50 years is 2500 from Adam. And that is grace times grace. 50 times 50. Isn't that interesting? The year of the redemption of Israel, when they got free of where they were freed from slavery. Okay. Abram was 100 years old when Isaac was born. That's Genesis 21:5. So that's an additional 30 years on the age of Abram, makes him 100 years old, which is, of course, 2100 from Adam. Isaac was 60 years old when he begot Jacob and Esau, the twins, of course. Genesis 25:26. And that's in 2160 from Adam. Do I have to mention something here? Not particularly. Okay. So the arrival of Jacob in Egypt, we can easily calculate that one, because Genesis 47 verse 28 says that Jacob lived in Egypt for 17 years, and he dies at the age of 147. So he was 130 years old when he arrived in Egypt. And now the memorable year of the Exodus. So the Exodus was in 2500 from Adam. It's fantastic. Genesis 15 verse 13 through 14 says that God told Abram his seed, singular, from Isaac would be strangers in a land that will oppress them 400 years. And after that, they are freed. That's the Exodus. You read about that in Exodus 12, verse 40 to 41 in the Septuagint. So, again, from Abram's seed, singular, Israel would be strangers in a land that will oppress them. If you look here, this was the birth year of Isaac, 2100. Abram's seed, in that sense. And this is the year of the Exodus, exactly 400 years difference. In Galatians 3:16-17, as I read before, it says the law came 430 years after God's promise to Abram, the same year as the Exodus, the 50th Jubilee year, liberation of slavery. 50 times 50 years is grace times grace. So, after that, what happened? Unbelief happened. Unbelief of Israel, because they didn't believe God and they didn't trust God that He would would free the land, the promised land, of every occupier for Israel. They didn't believe God. So what happened? They stayed in the wilderness for 40 years until the generation of unbelief died. Yes, that's what happened. So 40 years after the Exodus, they were in the desert, in the wilderness. Acts 13 verse 17-18, you can read that. And also Numbers 32:13, Joshua 5:6, Psalms 95 verse 10, and Acts 7 verse 36. So, arrival in the promised land was 40 years after the Exodus. Acts 13:19. It says, after having exterminated 7 peoples in the land of Canaan, not in 1 year, it says, it is written, but in a number of years. In Exodus 23:29-30, it says, not in 1 year, God allotted the land to them. I made a mistake, sorry for that. So they were 40 years in the desert, in the wilderness, and then they started to conquer the land. not 1 year, because 7 different peoples needed to be exterminated. Why exterminated? Because there were Nephilim in the land. And Nephilim will corrupt the bloodline to the Messiah. That's why they had to be exterminated. God knows what he's doing, obviously. How long did the conquest take? 10 years. Until another Jubilee cycle was finished. 10 years. So it was the 450th year after Isaac was born. So in that year, let's see here. Yes, so the conquest and allotment of the land happened 450 years from the fathers, being Abram and Isaac, onto the conquest and allotment of the land. And that is according to Acts 13 verse 20. So then they receive for the first time instructions from God to keep the Sabbath years and the Jubilee years. That you can read about in Leviticus 25 verse 2 to 22. So again, the 450th year from the fathers. So the year 2520 from Adam, which was another Jubilee year in which they got the instruction. Isn't that interesting? So then they are to recognize it. And this is very easy. Why? Because then from that moment on, from the instructions on, a new Jubilee cycle would start. So everything was calculated by God and directed by God to a T. So I think I'm going to stop here, because after this it's going to have other interesting events. So let's stop here, and then we continue in the next video. Thank you very much for watching. See you next time. Bye bye.